Hey folks, if you are hearing my voice come through your speakers or your headphones, that means that you hopefully intentionally have clicked on episode 3 of A Level Deeper. I want to welcome you aboard. My name is Chad Miles. I don't know if you can relate to this, but do you ever hear phrases or sayings that you just feel like are completely misleading? They just kind of bother you? I don't know. When it comes down to relationships, I think of sayings like true love is effortless and love should be easy. And frankly, I just think those are kind of utter nonsense.
That's what takes good relationships to great. Why not take time to really take a loving look at our relationship with a professional? A lot of people think that, oh, you must be really struggling or hitting rock bottom if you're doing couples therapy or individual. It's like, no, I just want to enhance what we already have and make it even more positive. Because I think we're both always open to that growth too.
On the show today, my wife Eileen and I pull back the curtain on our relationship. And I wanted to have her on because I wanted to talk about this idea that the foundation of a really positive, deep relationship is actually a lot of hard work and intentional work. Today, we're going to talk about the foundation that started it all, why we believe great relationships take work, and some examples of the work we do individually and as a couple to show up as our best. And as I mentioned, spoiler alert, we don't think our love is effortless at all. And we actually like it that way. Oh, and by the way, we recorded this episode in our van. We were sitting somewhere in the woods in Canada near Whitehorse in the Yukon Territory. So you might hear some movement from our dog, Sadie, or some other little sounds, but they're pretty infrequent and don't make much of a difference in the episode. Anyway, just wanted to let you know. Now, enjoy my conversation titled Love is Supposed to be Hard with Eileen Miles. One of the questions that we get asked the most, well, I guess for people who don't know us personally, describe where we're recording this conversation right now and what our life currently looks like.
We are sitting about 3 feet from each other in our living room, but also our kitchen, but also our bedroom. And we live in a van, and we are currently in the middle of nowhere in the woods in the Yukon.
One of the questions that people ask us the most, so we've been living together in a van for almost a year and a half, and it seems like just about any time we come across, new people who encounter us, they are like shocked to learn that we live in 70 square feet together. Like you said, we're currently in every room in our house all at once, including almost a bathroom, but that's a separate room.
Yeah.
And so we'll tell people that, and they'll just say, "Oh my gosh!" And you still like each other.
Mm-hmm.
And what's your answer to that?
Of course, we like each other more. I think, yeah. We even had the Border Patrol guy ask us when we crossed over into Alaska, and he said, "You guys are still together? You still like each other?" Yeah, and I think that's what a lot of people said too when we were leaving. You just got married and you're going to go live in a small space together? But I think it's brought us closer, literally and figuratively. Is that the right word?
Yeah, I mean, I think people have a hard time imagining when we sort of describe, like, I think we said it to each other last night as we were going to bed. We are together all the time. And I think that's a difficult thing for people to imagine, like spending a year and a half, almost 24/7 in 70 square feet with your partner.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I feel the same way as far as, it's a no-brainer that, oh yeah, I mean, we love each other. This experience has been incredible. Let's walk back a little bit and explain to people how we got to this point. And I guess more specifically, I'm talking about living in the van, because I think living in the van together has, sort of like heightened and brought out all these different tools that we've learned and some of these different maybe kind of ideas or principles that we can talk about as far as building like a strong relationship that can endure, tests like this. But let's walk back a little bit to how we ended up that we've been living in a van together for 18 months. from your point of view, walk us through how that process kind of came to be.
Well, first of all, I just want to say you're my best friend. So it's also just like we enjoy each other's company so much. But of course we can do this. So you gotta really like each other. I remember that's something my aunt said right when we met early on. She was like, "You're not just making out with him, right? You really like him." And I was like, "Yeah, I really like him and his company." So,
well, hold on, let's dig into that. When you say that or when you hear that, you have to really like them.
mm-hmm.
What does that mean to you?
It's probably more about I like who I can be around you. You make me feel safe and I can just be goofy and weird and you're just easy to enjoy being around. And you've always been just this steady energy for me too. And we both see eye to eye on how we want to experience the day for the most part. And just, yeah, we have a lot in common and I feel like it's easy.
Well, I really like that. Thank you.
That makes sense.
That makes sense. I really like that idea of, feeling like you can be yourself. We've often talked about for both of us, that the individuality of being in a relationship together and maintaining some of that through being together. You bring up, liking each other. And I guess that makes me want to actually pivot and go further back because our relationship of being together romantically for 10 years now, married for almost 2 years, our relationship didn't immediately start in a romantic way. Tell people how our relationship got started and the foundation was.
We reunited because we knew each other in second and third grade. We reunited in high school and we just were right away. I think I was just drawn to you, but I was still so guarded. And because I had just gotten out of a really long relationship. And so you were just my great, great friend, my really, really good friend. And we hung out in groups. We would always end up talking to each other, though. Like I said, I was always just drawn to you, but you're always just my good friend, Chad. So yeah, I friend zoned you really, really hard in the beginning.
I made it pretty clear that I was hoping for more, right?
You did. Yeah, you did. You did.
So then we went through this kind of song and dance of this 8-month period where I had expressed to you a couple of times that I was interested in being more than friends. And as you said, you were coming off of a relationship and not feeling like you were in a position to be open to being in a relationship again.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny, we refer to those days as the days of confusion. They were just sort of a confusing time where I think you've said, you probably deep down in your heart were drawn to me, but
oh yeah,
rightfully so. You had gone through a difficult end of a relationship, and that's an emotional experience. And well, I'll joke and I'll give you a hard time about that, but I think, as you just said, the fact that we had this 8-month period where we could really get to know each other, and not in a romantic way, but in a friendship type of way. As I look back on it now, I feel like that was a really important foundation to our relationship. And I wouldn't have done it any other way because, that's how you get to kind of see someone. And I think that created this environment where we could be ourselves and feel really comfortable. And that's sort of when that time came when you were feeling more open to, I think it was being vulnerable, right? And opening up your heart to another person.
Yeah.
Then we had that really strong foundation of being very comfortable with one another and feeling like we can be ourselves. I don't know. I just feel like that was a really important thing as I look back. Do you kind of view it the same way?
Oh yeah, I'm teary-eyed over here. I feel like just setting that foundation of enjoying each other's company, respecting each other, learning how to be really great friends, listen to each other, get to know each other. I mean, you've always just done that from the beginning too, I feel like. I remember when we used to text as friends and you would send paragraphs and just, I would too, and that would be just what we did, and in person as well. Just talking and laughing. So many heart to hearts right off the bat, you know? And I feel like that's so important to do right away. But I also feel bad that I friend zoned you, but I think it's so important too. It's such a kind of yin and yang type of a thing.
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't, looking back on it now, I wouldn't change that happened. I think it was a good thing. So that's kind of the story of how we started.
Well, I want to say too, then you literally said to me, are you ready to take the risk and dive in to this relationship more? And I was like, okay. Because that's really what I think being in a relationship with someone, it is risky. You might, and I think that's what held me back so much, is I was just afraid of losing you or losing what we already had too, you know? And that's just what you have to do. Like, I would rather love really, really hard and lose it all than not love at all. That was kind of what it came down to, I think. So,
where did that fear come from for you?
Well, it was definitely my previous relationship. It felt like it ended so abruptly, and, you know, I still get triggered if I hear people are divorcing or, ending their relationships. And to me, it seemed like it was so fast, but it was probably something that happened over a period of time, right? So it's just that fear of being vulnerable and putting yourself out there and really loving with your whole heart. And then all of a sudden it's like, what's that saying? Or just the floor moves out from underneath you type of a thing. You're just like, what? So, but I think pretty quickly I learned with you that it was different, you know, and even though it still feels risky and vulnerable, it's different when you have someone who feels very committed and you're very much so just deeply in love. I feel like right when I finally let myself love you, it just is like, okay, here we go.
I like how you talk about the idea of risk, because I'm with you. I mean, I think inherently, anytime you're gonna commit yourself and open up your heart to someone and enter into any form of relationship, whether it's romantic or it's a friendship, you know, whatever.
True.
There's always a level of risk that's involved, because you're trusting someone, and the risk is that they don't reciprocate the relationship, or, you know, something happens that someone kind of disobeys your trust, or it is an inherently risky thing. And I don't know, I feel like that's good and okay to acknowledge. You know, sometimes I feel like when the idea of starting a relationship with someone, it's kind of like everything has to be seen through like a positive light.
Yeah.
But sometimes I like talking about some of the things that, like, yeah, it's a really big risk.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be a scary thing for, as you said, coming off of a previous relationship, or just if you have previous experiences in your life, you know, whatever it may be. For some people, it's a really big risk to jump into something new. It's a challenge.
You know what's so weird about that, though, at the same time, is that I felt that with you, but at the same time, I was like, there's no one else I would rather risk it with, though, you know? Like, if I'm gonna jump into a relationship again and dive in really, really fully and really love hard, I wanted it to be with you right away. I knew it, too. And I feel like that actually takes us back to choosing to do van life, too. It's such a risk to do something so different and unique and wild and seemingly crazy, but there's no one else I would rather do it with. Like, it was so uncertain of what it was going to look like, but I was so certain that you were going to be the best human being. Well, we were married too, so it just had to be, but you know what I mean? I think that's kind of cool too. So I guess to take it back to that question, maybe, I feel like it all started, you know, when we were just exploring travel more and looking into tiny houses and everything, right? We did that kind of series of checking out a bunch of different tiny houses, which was so fun. Mostly local tiny houses. There was one up in northern Michigan. There was one in Ohio, right? And then that getaway house we went to, that was really cool too. But then we realized that, wait, we want to be able to go far. And so let's have a tiny house on wheels. And that whole process, I mean, I don't know, that was such a risk too. To leave our apartment, to move back home with your mom, which, love you, Mom. Thank you for everything. And yet, look, it's been the most rewarding thing ever. And it's like, it's so true with our relationship too. I feel like anything that's risky is also going to be maybe rewarding. Not everything, but, you know?
Well, hopefully it is.
Hopefully.
But that's the risk that we take, right?
Right.
And I think I like how you brought it back to van life, because in the same way, living in a van and embarking on this lifestyle was going to be a huge risk. And for our relationship, in many ways, it was going to be at risk. And that was something that we talked about was, I think it was important that we communicated around the fact and just accepted that this was a risk. There was a possibility that either of us didn't enjoy living in the van and traveling in this lifestyle in the same way that the other person did.
Yeah.
That was a potential outcome, a potential risk. I feel like we had some conversation just around, we still wanted our relationship together to be strong and enjoyable and fun. And if that were ever not the case, then could we have a conversation about, abandoning this lifestyle and trying to prioritize that? But I like how you brought it back to van life, because it was a huge risk, especially for our relationship. But I think communicating on some of those things and setting the expectations for what might happen, and then ultimately just like jumping into the relationship in the first place, there's just this element of trust that you have to put into the other person, that they're going to be willing to go on this journey together and accept the imperfections. And, because just like when you're starting a relationship, and we experienced it in the van, there was that first period of just, This is amazing. This is the greatest thing we've ever done. Nothing could possibly, tear us down. And then pretty quickly you realize that there's imperfections, whether that's in the other person or living in the van. There was imperfections in the lifestyle, and there were elements of it that were going to be really challenging.
Yeah.
And then ultimately, can you move through those and accept some of those imperfections? So I feel like there's a lot of
parallels,
a lot of mirrors between the two situations.
Yeah. I feel like we should talk more about that too, because I think, the beginning was so fun. I remember we got down, we only made it to like Ohio and everything. And it was so exciting just leaving and being like, we're doing it, diving into it. And then, our water ran out, and I don't know, power stuff happened. And then I remember, we kind of still do this, but in order to get through that challenge, what did you call me? I was like the mayor of the water. Like we had to figure it out. And then you were like the mayor of the electricity. Like we had to bring some comic relief into the situation, because it is a lot to adapt to only having 33 gallons of water for 4 days, whatever. And so navigating that stress and I don't know, that anxiety, we kind of like had to create some roles for each other, bring a little bit of joy and comic relief into it, which I think we do in our relationship too.
I started this podcast for a very specific reason. I crave meaningful conversations and wanted to create an outlet to have more of them in my life. By recording discussions I was already having with friends and new conversations with new people, I guess I just wanted to bring deeper, more thoughtful conversations to a larger audience, because I think we all have an opportunity to grow from them. I gotta tell you, it makes me uncomfortable to do so, but I'm asking for your help. I'm imagining a show funded by the people who want to support deeper conversations. So for the cost of 2 coffees per month, you can help keep this show going, and as a thank you, get access to some exclusive behind-the-scenes content that isn't available anywhere else. In the episode description is a link to our Patreon where you can pledge your support and automatically get access to all the bonuses. So after the show, I'd love if you'd head there and check it out, and thank you in advance for your support. Okay, back to the episode.
Which to me goes back to that idea of, I feel like in developing that friendship, we sort of created this environment where it was okay to have fun together and to be funny and silly.
Yeah.
And I can definitely confirm that we still do that every single day.
Are we gonna let people know how weird we are?
I don't think so.
Okay.
But living in this small space together, existing in this space, you talked about some of the things we realized early on that were going to be challenging. And there's just constant things about this lifestyle that are many times more challenging than, I'm just going to say, more typical traditional life. But I'm with you that that's one of the things that I think has helped make this experience, despite all the ups and downs, so enjoyable, is that we're just committed to having a lot of fun together. And we'll be in tense days or tense moments, and spoiler alert, we don't always get along super well.
Yeah.
Sometimes we have days where, we're not liking each other a whole lot, but we love each other.
100%.
But we'll interject, whether it's you or me, we'll just interject something silly or funny that should just lighten the mood. Some of those attempts to just keep things lighter and to remember, like, hey, we're both trying our best here, and let's not have that get in the way of all the amazing things that we are doing.
Yeah. Well, there's so much I think we've learned with doing couples therapy too, is just about just those different ways of communicating to each other. Because usually if we're not having a fun day, which is something you usually say, is I'm not really having fun today. If like we're in a moment of, not really getting along or something, and we usually just get quiet and kind of keep to ourselves. And that's how you break the silences. I'm not having fun today. But I feel like just remembering that we're on the same team is so important. It's easy to forget, but like, it's not you and I against each other. It's you and I against whatever the conflict is or the stress of the day is. And then something that I feel like we've learned in couples therapy is just trying to like say, hey, I woke up kind of feeling off, or I'm really down about this. It has nothing to do with you. Just letting you know what I'm holding. And then it just like allows each other to be like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Because there's no way that you can live in a van with your partner and like hide how you're feeling. And I think that's okay though. It's allowed us to talk more about it, because it is sometimes still hard even for me to express feelings and make sense of it and share it and talk about stuff with each other. And yet you are kind of forced to in the van because you're a foot apart.
Yeah, you can't go into another room for the day or, leave the house. There's nowhere else to go. So it creates this sort of pressure chamber in a positive way, where if we're on a drive and we've got an 8-hour drive and we're not getting along a whole lot, we're 2 feet away from each other
driving
for 8-hour period. And the first 2 hours might be quiet, but usually by hour 3 or 4.
Yeah, and that's okay. Like, we also still know that you don't have to talk it out right away. You're allowed to say, hey, let's talk about this at a later time, or.
So I want to dive into some more of the tools that Susie has taught us, and shout out to Susie. Susie came in as our couples therapist that we've been working with for a couple years now.
Yeah, love her. Learned so much.
Yeah, let's go back to. Let's explain some of how that came about. And I guess to preface it, one of the reasons I wanted to have this conversation with you today was I talk often about I'm a believer in great relationships take a lot of work. And I say that because sometimes I just feel like it's portrayed that, if you're really in love, it's just this effortless process and it's just joy and bliss. And sometimes I feel like true love is portrayed like that.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's very accurate, because to me, effortless is sort of the opposite of what it is. And I don't mean that in a negative way, but I would recognize that you and I put a lot of effort and intentionality into making our relationship a positive thing. And it is consistent hard work to, both as individuals, work through things, move through things, learn about ourselves, try to show up for each other the best that we possibly can. Mm-hmm. And as a couple, to try to implement different things throughout our days and throughout our weeks that helps build our relationship to be more positive and maintain it over the long haul, as we have for 10 years. Which relatively is maybe on the shorter scale of things, but I think we've got still a great foundation, a lot of tools to propel us for the next 40, 50, 60 years.
Oh, yeah.
So one of the things that, one of the types of work that we do is, as a couples therapy, like you mentioned. Just kind of share a little bit about how that came about.
Yeah. It actually was during the pandemic. I connected with Susie because she was doing some virtual sessions, I believe. Of course, virtual sessions for couples, but also I think she was doing some group stuff too. And I said, hey, I want to do one together, And so we did a group couple session called Cooped Up Couples, which is hilarious now because you and I are cooped up essentially every day in the van. We get out of the van. That's one thing too. Side note, people are like, you live in a van? It's like, no, I live in the entire world. We're outside a lot. We're hiking. Front yard is massive, unless we're in a Walmart parking lot. But anyway, so yeah, we started with that really cool experience of Cooped Up Couples, and then we decided we wanted to work with her.
And explain a little bit about what was the state of our relationship at that point.
I think at that point we did struggle a little bit with having those, not knowing how to express how we were feeling, or maybe would not necessarily listen too well sometimes. I'm talking to myself because you are an A+ listener. And I think everyone's relationship during the pandemic, it was challenging. We were trying to navigate that, and I don't know. I have a bad memory sometimes. I'm like,
well, the reason that I think I asked mainly was, I think my perception of our relationship at that time was overall very positive.
Yeah.
Meaning, it's not like we were in some, I'm going to say kind of dark or negative place as far as what our relationship was like together. Overall, I think we were at a pretty positive point. And like you said, we recognized that there were a few areas as far as when there were things that we either didn't see eye to eye on or disagree on, or we just kind of noticed some of these patterns and saw opportunities that we could take a very good relationship and make it even better if we worked on a few of these different things. And I think I guess I just see that as important to share, because I think sometimes when we share that we do individual therapy, which we could talk about more later, and couples therapy, there's sort of this assumption that people have sometimes that, oh, well, people that do therapy, especially couples, is if you really need help and you're in trouble. It's almost like this last ditch effort. If your relationship's not in a good place and you've tried a lot on your own, then you might go seek out couples therapy as a way, as sort of a, maybe last effort or last resort to try to heal some of the things that are in your relationship and try to save it. And that was definitely not our experience, right? So I just think that is important to share.
Oh, yeah. Well, of course, when I think of our relationship, it's very, very, very positive. And there's just those little things that I think we recognize that this would be good to talk about. Else, what are you doing?
If you're hearing shuffling in the background, that's because our dog Sadie, who also lives in the van with us, who is a 50-pound Australian Shepherd, is getting scared by
Okay, good girl.
a nearby gun range that we are parked by. So these are some of the things that happen when you live in a van.
So I was gonna say that there are still things that were little that we could kind of still navigate or just kind of brush to the side. And like you just said, like that's what takes good relationships to great. Why not take time to really take a loving look at our relationship with a professional? Like I just saw it as a great opportunity. Um, we loved her energy, loved, what we learned in that cooped up couples session. And yeah, I think that's such a good point because I agree. A lot of people think that, oh, you must be really struggling or hitting rock bottom if you're doing couples therapy or individual. It's like, no, I just want to enhance what we already have and make it even more positive. Because I think we're both always open to that growth too. I think growth is really important to always be open to that and not be like, oh no, we're fine. We can figure it out. Because I think that's something too, especially with individuals. It's like, no, it's fine. I know how to figure it out on my own. But no, you don't have to do anything alone.
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back right to the idea of doing work. And you mentioned earlier on in our conversation how there's also the idea of us, entering into a relationship as individuals. And I think it's been important that we also maintain some of that individuality within our relationship and do work as individuals so that as a couple we can show up our best selves. Kind of that idea that if I'm not taking care of myself, or if I'm not doing work, or if I'm not trying to make myself better or the best that I can be, understand some of the ways that I show up that I'm not proud of, or ways that I might show up that I just don't feel like are beneficial to, our relationship long term, then that's kind of on me.
Mm-hmm.
And so in addition to couples therapy, actually before we started couples therapy, each of us were doing our own individual therapy as well. It had started a bit before it.
Yeah, for sure.
Following that idea that doing the work as individuals was really important.
It really is. I do think, though, there's that whole idea of like, you gotta love yourself first before you love anyone else. And I don't know if I necessarily agree with that too much, I feel like there's so much growth that we can do together, or we could kind of support each other in our growth together as well. Or help each other, like how you love me and support me allows me to see myself in a whole new way and create a more deeper love towards myself too. Does that make sense? Like,
it does, yeah. Well, maybe it's not, you've got to love yourself, but I feel like we've talked about, you do have to have an idea of yourself and who you are and some of that sense of individuality, right? To be able to enter into that relationship and be with someone. I think there does need to be kind of a sense of knowing, of having an idea of, I have this idea and sense of who I am.
Yeah.
I feel like that's important.
I do agree with that. Well, because, you don't complete me.
Yeah.
And well, there's this quote too, though, that's like, yeah, we're both, I'm totally going to mess it up, but it's essentially like, I put in effort so that I can light up and be the brightest version of myself. You do the same thing. So we're like two individual light bulbs that then light up the whole world or something like that, So it's just, yeah, you really have to have a great sense of self and then come together with that as well.
Explain what you mean when you say you don't complete me. Because again, I feel like typically in a relationship, that'd be like almost like a negative thing to say.
Mm-hmm.
But when you say that, I'm like, absolutely. So
Well, and
explain what
even
you mean.
like it, it kind of reminds me of like, I think I used to say this to you too. It's like, what would I do without you? But it's like, I don't know. It's strange. Like we choose each other, and you mean a lot to me, and I love our life, and I'm so grateful that we are doing this life together. And I'm responsible for my happiness. I'm responsible for my joy and contentment and filling up my cup. I can't rely on you to do all of those things. Although you do that sometimes, but that's just a bonus to what I already do for myself and how I already support and love myself too.
Yeah, I think that idea of it's a bonus, not sort of a requirement is a big one.
Yeah.
We kind of have that responsibility and we support each other in it and kind of hold each other capable of it. That individually we have that responsibility to, as we talked about, do the work as individuals and do the things that we need to do to show up as our best selves. And then when we do that, it just becomes that bonus that the other person can help support you or hold you capable, or you can experience certain things together. And that can make those experiences, even better or stronger. That becomes a bonus on top of doing that work as individuals to show up as our best selves, which was really, for me, I was, out of the two of us, I was the one who started a therapy journey first.
Yeah.
And, it was something that I had had interest in for kind of a long time. Not really knowing it at the time, but when I was living at home with my mom was essentially my therapist, as far as,
She's amazing. Yeah.
she now going through therapy, she would essentially host kind of quasi therapy sessions with me pretty frequently. So thank you, Mom. I mean, we would
still does.
Yeah, yeah. After dinner at night, she would sit there and talk with me for sometimes hour, 2 hours, about all the things that I was kind of thinking through and processing. And so, Mom, I know you're listening to this, so I'm very, very grateful for that. But I think that kind of primed me to the idea that having someone to process all these things going on in my head and, help me just sort of make sense of some of this. Again, that same idea that in order to seek or pursue therapy, you don't have to have a mental health crisis or be diagnosed with something or, be in a really dark or difficult place or be depressed. Those could all be reasons why you might seek therapy and why therapy might be beneficial. For me, I wasn't necessarily in those states, but I recognized that there were some of these patterns that I just felt like were maybe holding me back. And if I could understand some of them better, more deeply, then could I more consistently show up as a version of me that would be just more helpful in my day-to-day life. And those conversations kind of started with my mom and then ended up where I sought my own therapist. And now I've been working with Mikkel for, I think, almost 3 years on a weekly basis. And it's been just an incredible experience. But a lot of that was that same foundation to thinking, I wasn't necessarily doing it for you. I was doing it for me.
Yeah.
But I think that our relationship has greatly benefited from the fact that I started doing it. And then you started your own individual therapy, I think within, the first year of kind of being like, hey, this seems like this is beneficial for you. Maybe I should try it. I guess talk a little bit through how you decided that individual therapy was something that you wanted to check out.
I feel like you can never have, enough things that can support you in your healing. I love meditation, yoga, movement. I don't know, talking with you, of course, talking with my parents too. My parents are also really great listeners. Love you both. You can never, though, have enough, things to help support you and your processing and healing and understanding why you are the way that you are. So that's kind of why I chose to. And I was dealing with a lot of anxiety, I feel like, during that time, figuring out what I was going to do and noticing some of my either thought patterns or behavioral patterns and how I was showing up in our relationship too, or how, things were impacting me on a daily basis, and realizing that, oh, it actually doesn't need to be this way. And so getting a therapist to help me navigate that and talk through that is so important, because so much I feel like in couples is, oh, you need to change. It's not me that needs to change. It's the other person. And I realize that no, it's actually a lot of, my own responsibility to figure out how to soothe my own nervous system to not react in such a way, or to communicate in a way that helps us figure out a new way forward, stuff like that. Yeah. So I agree with you completely. It's just, sure, I was struggling a little bit with some things, but overall, I'm a very happy, peaceful, calm human being. And that takes work too. And one of those things that helps is therapy. I think everyone needs to have a therapist for sure.
What makes you say that?
Because else I think a lot of people will just fall into the trap of being on autopilot and not taking the time to really look at themselves. And just life is so much better when you do take the time to slow down and understand yourself. There's something about that. Here I am again with another quote. This one I actually kind of know. The degree at which you meet yourself is the same degree at which you'll meet others. And so I feel like therapy allows you to understand yourself better. It allows you to take the time to just like allow yourself to feel whatever you're feeling, to validate yourself, all of that, right? And in doing that, you're able to take time to listen, understand, and validate your partner, your friends, anyone. So I just think it's such a important thing to do. Else we're just going to whip through life, not really even knowing why we react this way, and it's just going to constantly be a cycle. Yeah.
I'm definitely with you in that. I think anyone can benefit from the experience of going to therapy, having that outlet to just process
exactly
what's going on in your life. I mean, it's been amazing. I consider myself someone who even before therapy was a pretty reflective person, and I, would take a look at my life and think about the things that are going on and overthink often. And so both having the outlet to just process all of this overthinking and get it out and speak it into existence helped me make sense of things. And it's just been incredible to see how much I've actually learned about myself and how much I've uncovered and how much some of these continuous patterns that I was experiencing in my life go back to things that happened in my childhood or in my adolescence. And without bringing awareness to them, they just perpetuate. And like you said, that idea of being on autopilot, we just kind of go through life, I think, accepting this. Nate and I talked about it in our episode. We just become sort of accustomed to the pain or the dis-ease that we experience in our lives. And so we sort of just accept that as the baseline. Well, this is just how my life is. And so I'll just keep going on.
Mm-hmm.
And so to me, therapy is really that process of recognizing that there is dis-ease within your life and saying, well, maybe instead of just perpetuating this and going through this continuous cycle, I'm going to take a little bit of a deeper look into it and see what's beneath there. And that's a scary feeling.
It is. And it's also one of the most rewarding things you'll ever do too, I feel like. It's really helped us a ton, I feel like. I don't know, because I do know some van life couples that it is really hard, and there's a lot of fighting. And I remember we had friends over in here, and she sat down and she was like, so do you guys like fight in here and yell at each other? It's such a small space. And I was like, we actually don't that much. And I mean, we fight, but we've learned how to really regulate our own nervous systems and slow down that process versus just the back and forth, this and this. And I mean, I don't know. There's so much we could dive into with that. Just with, listening, telling each other that makes sense. I feel like that kind of reminds me of what we were just saying is like, we need that person, that therapist to be like, that makes sense that you're struggling with that. I imagine it makes you feel this way, or, having that empathy. And then we can learn how to kind of do that together too. Cause we all just want to be heard too at the end of the day. And I think that a lot of fights happen because you don't feel seen and heard. And so a lot of our healing and growth has come from acknowledgement and recognizing certain things or considering certain things about each other, and then really doing that whole mirroring thing, where we kind of reflect and paraphrase what the person just said to make sure we got it. And just, I don't know, I felt called to share that. I feel like that's just a little insight there.
Well, yeah, I mean, going back to, why we started couples therapy, when people talk about fighting, yeah, we definitely fight. We're kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum, where I would call us quiet fighters, meaning we don't fight loud. We don't fight by raising our voices. We don't fight by yelling at each other. But when we're fighting, we both tended to withdraw and get quiet. And so it's sort of the opposite, rather than maybe saying hurtful things or, kind of lashing out at each other in those moments. We would both withdraw, and then that nothing would be said. And so we would make either no progress, and then that allows the opportunity to create all these different stories and narratives in our own heads about what's going on.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so when we talked about, we saw opportunities for us as a couple to just kind of get better. I think that was the main one, was in so much of what we've learned from Susie and our couples therapy have, as you were just sharing, been these tools around how do you navigate conversations in moments of a disagreement or not seeing eye to eye on something. There's within your relationship, if you think about it, I'm sure there's some of those recurring things that are just difficult topics and you don't see eye to eye. And they're kind of those triggers that come up. And every time they come up, they might trigger a fight or a disagreement. And so in working with Susie, I think some of these tools that we've learned have all been about managing our own individual reactivity in those moments, because they're going to come up.
Yeah.
For us, money is a challenging one. I've learned a lot in my therapy that has a lot to do with some of my just history and story growing up as a kid, and my family having money and then going through an experience where we didn't so much, and I felt some of that. I noticed that, and so now money's a hot topic for me because I associate security with it. And anyway, like that's an example of something that comes up a lot for us. And so through our couples therapy, we've just learned some of these tools to be able to navigate those conversations and not get to such a heightened state where, again, for us, where we couldn't continue talking about it and we would both just get quiet.
Mm-hmm.
But now learning some of those different tools, like mirroring, slowing down the conversation, managing that reactivity.
Starting by saying, like, the story I'm telling myself is this, versus, oh my gosh, it's just so wild. Like, and I know I kind of just cut you off there. Did you want to keep going?
That's okay.
Okay. Just like, it makes a world of a difference to say that versus say, you're making me feel like blah, 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 right? It's the story I'm telling myself is that you like blah, blah, blah. And, and just, am I getting that right? And it's just, I don't know. It's just like a whole different energy. And she's just taught us those little kind of one-liner things to just start. We need to start talking and remembering we're on the same team. Because in those moments, we just forget, right? And so it's just about coming back and talking it out and not assuming things.
Yeah, it's a lot of, it's built on a lot of I statements, right?
Yeah, I feel.
I think so often when people imagine fighting or getting to a place where you're struggling with your partner, it's a lot of you statements. You don't do this, or accusations.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest things that we've learned is in those moments when you're not seeing eye to eye on something, and you're trying to navigate something difficult, it's making a lot of I statements. The story that I'm telling myself is this. The way that I feel is this. When this happens, I react this way.
Yeah.
And stating what you're feeling, what you're going through. And then the other allowing the other person to just understand what it is that you're thinking and feeling and experiencing. And then to have just a conversation about, oh, I didn't realize that that's how you were interpreting that or taking that. But now I'm more aware of that. And now I can see how maybe my actions led you to interpret it that way based on things that have happened in your life or whatever it might be. And I think it just, it brings this whole new awareness. But it's all about being able to, in those really tense moments or when you're going through something really emotional together, being able to have a more calm and productive conversation. And it's not like we're perfect at it, but after now, 2 years of being able to practice and having sessions with Susie where we can, she'll actually walk us through, we'll have an hour session together and she'll call it a dialogue, and we'll bring something that we're working through. And she'll sort of just guide us through having that conversation. We'll sit, we'll look at each other, and we'll go through, this kind of formula as to having the conversation together. And in doing that and in practicing it, I think we would both say that, we're really starting to see and bring it into more of our daily lives, and some of the different tools that she's taught us have become a really consistent things that we use all the time as we're navigating all these things. Because the reality of being in a relationship with someone is that, especially some of these kind of hot button topics, they're never going to go away. I think we've realized that and kind of come to terms with that. It's not about making these things go away. It's about understanding that as they continue to come up, having methods to be able to navigate them productively.
Yeah, it's all about navigating them, for sure. Yeah, I will say, there's moments where we're fighting, and of course I want to just yell back at you or something, or just not even mirror you, not even say that makes sense. Just be like, what are you even talking about? Of course there's moments where I want to say that. So I'm meditating, I'm breathing. So it takes a lot of practice and just, you have to constantly slow down. And I mean, that's what those tools help you do too. But it's such a practice. I'm feeling like we should just have Susie on here or something. That would be really cool. I think something that's really special that I've heard too, a couple years ago. No, it was like 4 years ago. A coworker of mine just was in the employee break room, and I was talking to you, and we were just talking, saying sweet things to each other, whatever, checking in. And I hung up the phone, and he was like, have you guys been together for like a year or so or what? And I was like, no, it's been like, 6-7 years. And he was like, what? I would have thought you would have been like a new relationship. And I was like, oh yeah, it's always just the honeymoon stage forever. But I think that just also goes to show how much we do respect each other. And another, thing we've put in our toolbox is also showing those appreciations. It's also saying those kind things. It's really understanding each other's love languages. It's being empathetic, and those kind of more on like the positive side, right? We've talked a lot about like, how do we get through all the fights? It's also like, how do you just see each other with more love and say like, I've noticed you doing this and I'm really proud of you, or I really appreciate you doing that. And always saying thank you for taking the trash out, for making the bed, for taking Sadie out, our dog, just all those little things I feel like enhance our relationship too. And it takes 2 seconds to just say something like that.
Noticing is huge. I think, like you said earlier, as humans, we all just want to be seen. And so the work that we're putting in, the things that we're doing to just notice and bring attention to it and appreciation for each other, I think has been really important. As we start to wrap up our relationship,
Hey, this is Chad from the future here. I meant to say that we were wrapping up our conversation, and it came out we were wrapping up our relationship. Just wanted to clarify that our relationship is very much still going. Anyway, let's get back to the conversation.
I just feel like we'd be remiss if we didn't kind of recognize a little bit and celebrate. Each of us comes from incredible families.
Yeah.
And incredible parents who, as I was just kind of was thinking about this conversation and thinking about the idea that we've learned a lot of this from somewhere. It's not like we just came up with all this on my own. Just to speak personally, in seeing my parents, and although my dad passed when I was 17, I still got 17 years of seeing my parents operate, and seeing my dad in particular, just teach me about what it meant to be a man of integrity and how it looked to, respect a woman. And yeah, I just think seeing them, my parents, operate as a couple, not as a perfect couple, but seeing the way that they would navigate things. And ultimately they had a relationship based on respect and based on, a friendship. And so I just think it's important to recognize some of where that comes from. And I look at my grandparents on both sides as well, had very long, amazing, fulfilling marriages, and even some of my aunt and uncles. So I think I'll allow you to speak on that too. But I think just to recognize that I've felt personally very blessed to have examples of really, really positive relationships that we've been able to kind of mold ours after.
Mm-hmm. I'm crying a little bit over here. Yeah, I think, well, of course, I think of my parents immediately too. My dad is the one that just brings so much goofiness and joy, and I feel like you do the same thing. And just so many moments where, it's just ingrained in my mind. My dad's like, we are a team. Me and your mom, oh yeah, we're a team. We got this. And, but also just finding joy in the mundane of, my mom will text me and say, oh yeah, we're in the aisles of Home Depot. Her and my dad just love to just do everything together too. Or just dig life outside in the yard and things like that. And so I think that's so important too. Yes, right now in our relationship, we're traveling and it's so epic, but I think that example of just being together is enough, and laughing a lot and being a team is something that, they've taught me too. And same thing with my grandparents too, and aunt and uncles, like just, a lot of really great marriages around us. It's really special.
Yeah, it's something that I've loved about getting to know your parents as well. As the more I've gotten to know your parents, it's like, it's no surprise that you are their daughter. And again, that you and I could have and build a positive relationship, because we have these positive relationships to emulate after. And especially, I just love how your parents have fun together, and they laugh and they joke. And like you said, they'll make shopping at Home Depot the most fun thing that you could almost ever do.
Yeah.
And I really enjoy and appreciate that. I think that's been really special to spend time with them. And we've got a lot of really positive relationships that I think have made a big impact on us and led us to this point.
Mm-hmm. So thank you, everyone. We love you.
We do. And I love you. Thanks for being willing to have this conversation with me today.
Oh my goodness, of course, Chad. I love you so much. Thank you for having me on your podcast.
If people wanted to find you and connect with you, how could they do that?
You can find me on Instagram at Eileen Rose Miles, and on Spotify and Apple Podcasts as well. I have a meditation podcast called The Inward Journey. You can explore some free meditations there, and maybe I will just make a couples meditation soon. So keep an eye out for that.
If you wanted to follow us as a couple, we have a couple Instagram account that is at The Miles Van Life, and you can see some of our van travels as we are currently making our way back from Alaska, but you can see more of both of us there. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to the show today. If you enjoyed what you heard, would you mind taking a moment to leave a review for the show on whatever platform you are listening on? It'd mean a lot to me and help more people find these conversations. And if you enjoyed listening, maybe you'd consider sharing it with someone who might enjoy hearing this conversation as well. See you next time.